We're continuing this series of my favorite passages, and we're going backwards from Revelation to Genesis, and I know that's the opposite way that most people would do it, but then most of you know that I'm different, and I like to do things sometimes the opposite way. But in any case, we're going to have fun doing this as we look at some of my favorite passages, and today we start a new book. It's the book of James, written approximately AD 46, which is only 13 years after Christ walked this earth. And we have just 5 chapters, but it's so rich. There's so much in the book of James. If you were looking for a simple outline of the book of James, it would be the testing of faith, the character of faith, and the triumph of faith. And so who is this James? Well, there's a lot of controversy about which James this is, but most accept the fact that it's the Lord's brother, a pillar of the church. You find in Acts 12 and Acts 15, and he's writing to the Hebrew Christians. And in chapter 1, beginning at verse 2, it says, "Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let that endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete and lacking in nothing." Well, I'm sure that the folks in North Carolina today who are along the coastline would certainly have a hard time considering it joy. As we watch the pictures on television, as we see the flooding, the wind damage, and we hear about deaths already, mother and an infant child killed, husband seriously injured as a tree fell on their house. I'm absolutely sure that those families considering it joy a very difficult task. There's certainly been times in my life, and I'm sure in your life, when you've had a hard time at the time you're going through it, to consider the trials and the difficulties of life joy. Looking back on it, most of us can relate to the fact that what it says is that we know that these testings of our faith will produce endurance, and that if we allow that endurance to have its perfect result in us, we'll be made perfect and complete and lacking in nothing. Well, it's a good start for this book because actually when James talks about faith, he talks about it being more than verbal. We can all say we have a lot of faith, and you've heard the old story about the man taking the wheelbarrow across Niagara Falls and saying, "Do you have faith?" And they all say yes, and he says, "Well, get in the wheelbarrow and let me take you across." It's easy to say we have faith, especially when we're not going through trials. And he says it's more than spoken, it's more than mental. That is, we can truly believe that God is able to do anything and that he can see us through anything. And we can truly believe that. But what James says in the book of James is that faith is action. Faith is actually doing. And that's where we get into the faith and works, and certainly we'll cover that before we're done with the book of James. But here we're going to have to do. What are we going to have to do? We're going to have to allow trials and tribulations to produce endurance so that we can look back and say, yes, it helped make me perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. I don't know if you're going through trials right now. We know a lot of folks that are going through some tough trials right now. A lady friend of ours that went through the same kind of surgery that Lois had, but hers was an emergency surgery. Hers involved a lot of infection and a lot of complications, and it followed right behind a major surgery she had. And she suffered through 50 days or more in the hospital and continues to wait for complete recovery. Can she consider that joy? I doubt seriously that right now she considers all of that joy. But with the amount of faith that she has, and not just being spoken faith and not just being mental faith, but being an action kind of faith, I'm convinced that in days ahead she will see that it produced endurance in her life and that it helped her to be perfect and lacking in nothing by knowing that God is able to see you through even the worst of circumstances. So I don't know what you're going through today. I don't know if you're one of those ones that may be watching this that has been through the trials and tribulations of a hurricane and major loss of property and maybe even loss of life. But I do know this: God is able, and that's just verbal. It's also mental because I know that He is able. But can it be action? If I go through much more than what I've already gone through, will I still be able to look back and say, God was using all things together for good so that I would be perfect and complete and lacking in nothing? It'll be a test, and it's not one that I'm looking forward to. However, I do believe that God will see me through, and I believe I'll be able to look back on it, maybe not during the time of it, and say, yes, God was working in my life, working all things together for good. That's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.